So you mentioned Miracle. Can we just talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's interesting thing about On You, because we talk about the On You catalogue, but of course you've done lots of productions, as you said, that have come out that haven't been issued on You Sound, and Miracle was one of them. Can you just talk which? I mean, I don't know if everybody knows this album, but if you've not heard the album, you really want to check it, because it's one of those kind of, for me, one of those kind of great lost albums in terms of crossing over. I think a lot of On You and BIM fans think it's wonderful, but we did expect great things from it. Can you talk us through the kind of genesis of how that started and how it ended up the album?
Well, I still think, a lot of the reggae vocalists are so brilliant, but you wanted to hear the voice more, the song more. We did an acoustic recording with Skip MacDonald and Bonjo at Southern, where we filmed it, and that kind of spurred me on. So I wanted to make a track just with Bim's voice, a very minimal production, and it just coincided with working with Talvin Singh, and then we decided to put like kind of Indian flavour to it. And basically the idea was to have his voice right up front, so you could just hear how wonderful his songs and his voice was. And the only reason we didn't release it on You again was lack of finance, and I thought a bigger label could possibly give it a chance of going to a wider arena, to be honest.
So it was one of those situations where, like, basically the concept was just an acoustic album, but it ended up with a fairly lush Bombay string orchestra.
It still is a kind of an acoustic album,
yeah.
And it did do well. It sold, quite a lot of copies, but I reckon that should have sold, 10 times or 20 times what it sold.
Well, maybe like one of those classic albums that you put it on, it doesn't sound a dated album now, does it? It still sounds...
No, I think it still sounds good. That's 16 years old or something like that.
Yeah,
15 years old.
Let's talk about, have a word about another key collaborator over the years, who is Bonjo. How did you come into contact with Bonjo?
Well, towards the end of Creation Rebel, he was playing with the band, and he had an interest in kind of not just cliche percussion. He was all, the cliched reggae stuff. He was also into Afro-Cuban and African stuff. So I just decided to do some experimental record with him, because I'd heard that quote of Brian Eno, the Vision of a Psychedelic in Africa quote, and I thought it was a bit corny, but then I thought about it, I thought, it could be really interesting. And then we just started making kind of all bent up kind of African stuff with little bits of tape, and then,
But Bonjo came as a master drummer, basically.
Master drummer, he was the best one we had. He was really good.
Yeah.
But then there's all the other things. At the time I was working with my big mate Mark Stewart, who was lurking in there somewhere, and he was kind of into that Burroughs Geisen thing, cutting up tapes and whatever else. So we were just at the time obsessed with staying in the studios as long as we could and learning what we were doing and experimenting with tape, cut-ups and live performance and sonic. So,
and this was, I recall this era, this is early 80s, and this was what would be the pre-digitally era, when we all had bleeding fingers from the from the tape edits on the tape decks. But I remember you using one of the earliest, what's it called, digital harmonizer, the machine produced by AMS out of
from Burnley,
Burnley, Lancashire. Can you tell us about like beginning to adapt to that early digital capability? Because and I think it was called captured sound, you called it at the time, rather than sampling.
Yeah. I think everyone, now everyone's got kind of sampling. You can do anything. We used to do it though with Mark. We'd spend hours and hours cutting up and looping bits of tape just to get the sound, and inserting bits of noise into the recordings. And then with the AMS coming along, we could store 1.5 seconds of sound or 3 seconds at half speed and start moving things around. And that was kind of very early, I suppose, sampling that we were doing.
But that was another example of abuse rather than use of the technology, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think you just want to make stuff leap out of the speakers. That was the kind of idea. Yeah. And then Mark was pushing stuff, and he came up to me and he said, "I want the next album. I want my album to sound like this." This was like 1980 or something. I met him in '79. He said, "I want it to sound like this," and he played me a cassette of a Shaka gig, and but it was completely distorted, like recorded in the gig. Yeah. And I thought he meant, the music, but he meant The distorted kick, which is how most of his records sounded until.
Well, I think listening back to that first Mark Stewart album, I don't think there's anything been produced so kind of extreme or brutal still, isn't it? Really?
No, I think that album, we spent about a year making that. We spent nights and nights and nights on it, and Mark did that. That was kind of his vision of like how he wanted to hear John Shaka completely mangled up but cut up with. I think to this day, you think that's 30 years old. That's still, Learning to Cut with Cowley still sounds really, really good to me.
Yeah, I think it's became a template for a lot of people who followed, who sometimes, but mostly, don't really admit to it. That's kind of classic noise industrial album. But we better not speak any more about Mark, seeing he's here listening to him. But around about the same time, I think, though, in the early to mid 80s, you began to meet people from New York. Was it Tom Silverman specifically? Was that the first contact? Was it?
No, that came through Neil Cooper from ROI. He played in Mature. The first tune we ever did with a drum machine was "Watch Yourself" by Akaboo. He played that to Tom. Tom liked it. He'd heard some of the other On You stuff, and he invited me to New York. But that was spurred on by Mark and Nene and Ari. They were all raving about the things that were going on in New York and playing me, stuff. And then they had Mark in Bristol. They had the Dugout and all the other places we'd go to when I visited them. And there's this kind of that scene going on. They're all checking out the the kind of new hip hop scene in New York. And then I went there and met Double D and Steinsky and all these other characters that were experimenting. A bit later came the Latin Rascals, and they were all doing what we've been doing, Mark and me, but 100 times more accurately. Mark was deliberately editing him out of time, and they were editing them like massive triplet edits that were bang in.
So how was that kind of mutation of hip hop, or playing back of hip hop? How was that greeted in New York? Because Akaboo was released, wasn't it? And you did some mixing for Bambata and.
Well, the thing is, I didn't actually mix for Bambata. I did a few other things for Tommy Boy stuff, but we never did that well. Never sold. A lot of people said, "Oh, it sounds good," but it didn't quite fit in. To be quite honest with you.
But but some things came out of that, didn't they? And one of them obviously was Tackhead.
Well, that was our relationship with Doug, Skip and Keith, which lasts to this day. And although everyone's gone and done different things and still continues to do that, I think what we've done with Anya, we formed lots of long-standing friendships, and that's been great. And it's really sad that like Ari died a week ago this year. And that's really sad for us. And apart, but like I was saying, we still kind of know almost everybody we work with, and it's a lot of good tunes. They still sound good, a lot of the older ones. So.
But that the early Tackhead, though, I mean, there's a real distinction in output, really, between the early Tackhead and then.
They get me depressed, Steve. the early
Just
Tackhead
admit
was
it.
well, the early Tackhead was much noisier. Then it got a little bit,
Yeah. Why was that? I mean, it was just so obvious a change between like the first.
I think
there's
lots of different reasons. I think basically, a combination of bad drugs and kind of people going off doing different things, and then everything comes to an end. And I think when you've got people who want to do a bit of this, it doesn't work if it's not focused and really like you want to go one direction. If you have something where it's too many Chiefs, not enough Indians, it's best you have one thing that sounds like, okay, that's Little Axe, that's definitively, noisy Tackhead, that's kind of a beautiful singing with Bernard or something, or that's whatever. That works that way.
It always seemed to be more about it came out.
Well, it just collapsed at the end of it.
It came out of the studio and it was more a thing where they could actually play live, which I always found more disappointing. But what about the great contenders that never happened? For me, anyway, that's some of my favourites on you stuff was Fats Comet You know, the old idea of Temptations on acid and utilisation of all those like doo-wop samples, acapellas and what have you, was a real surge on the stuff you produced. But that kind of tailed off, didn't it?
I think again it was something that kind of, you know, people loved it that knew it, but it never really just took off. So I just think, I'm not being depressed, but we just kind of, I'd have liked it to have done a lot better.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't from lack of trying.
Yeah.
I think they still sound okay now, but they probably were a bit at odds with what was going on at the time, and they didn't quite fit in. And I suppose listening back on them, I can see why they're a little bit quirky or something.
So when you look back on that time, what are the works that you think would, if you're going to represent?
If I was to go through the whole thing, I think loads of them stand. I think that, you know, going through, started the first New Age Steppers, Starship Africa, which predates On You. Those are the year or so before. The Dub Syndicate recordings, in its time, Tunes from the Missing Channel, Stone Immaculate. Obviously, the Bim Miracle. I could go on and on. There's lots of them I'm really proud of that still years on sound good. I mean, the best thing I can think of, you look at dance music, it dates. You know, 2 years on, you're not hearing dance tunes in clubs. But with the old reggae and using that technique and that approach of the sonic, you could still play. If you went to Fabric now, you could play in the middle of the night, drop a dub tune from 40 years ago,
of course, and
it would fit in.
Yeah,
and I think with certain of our titles, they sound timeless because they're a bit more edgy or whatever, and others fit in because of the sonic on them, and they still sound good. Yeah. So I'm proud of lots of them, like Time Boom, The Devil Dead, coming on to The Wolf That House Built, Little Axe, and loads of them. I think they really still stand the test of time.
Well, you mentioned Time Boom, so let's talk about Mr. Perry then.